three generations of doctors in North Ireland, yeah.
Yeah.
And we're going to take you back to when your father came back to North Ireland and set up shop in about 1923.
He started practice in the square in Rathfriland in 1923. He'd been in hospital in Royal Berkshire in Reading for 2.5 years before that. Qualified Royal College of Surgeons in Dublin.
And he would have been in Dublin at the time of the 1916 Rising then?
He was, yes. And he talked about being in Dublin, time of the Black and Tans, being in a barber shop, and the Black and Tans coming in and putting everybody up against the wall, searching them.
Yes. And when he came back to Rathfriland in 1923, he just set up shop in the square in Rathfriland.
He put his plate up. He must have bought the house in the square and put his plate up and sat there and waited for patients to come. Nobody came, not a soul crossed the door for 3 weeks. And he had already employed a housekeeper, and not a soul appeared until after 3 weeks a man called Pat the Clock appeared. And he was delighted to see him. And he always claimed that this man brought him great luck. This was a man who, as I say, called Pat the Clock, went about with a stick over his shoulder and a little bag at the end of the stick. And but that was his nickname, Pat the Clock.
You don't know why he was called Pat the Clock?
No, I don't know why. No.
And so Papa, as we know, I knew, would have had his own dispensing surgery in the square. He would have made up his own drugs.
Yeah, well, the house in the square was it's a reasonably small house, but the first room was my mother's dining room, and it was the waiting room. Next room was my father's surgery. Across the hall, under the stairs, was known as his dispensary. Now, he's dispensed all sorts of bottles, coloured bottles of medicine of all descriptions, which worked wonders.
Some of them maybe with nothing in it.
Water, mainly.
And he referred to those as what? Remember they had a saying for that the chemist said about any damn thing.
No, that was his when he was getting frustrated with people in the surgery, and they'd put something on the prescription and the chemist couldn't make out what it was, and his writing was not very legible. But Robert Harbison in particular rang him one day and asked him, what was this on the prescription? What was it to give the patient? And he said, AD, it had written on the prescription, ADT, any damn thing.
And you remember as a boy, the people that would have been coming into the surgery about that time. There's a big difference in what people were like now. The poverty must have been quite dramatic.
Poverty was real poverty in those days. You hadn't houses themselves, like say in Castle Street, earthen floors, big family in a tiny small house, and they really were in poverty.
Big
and
family.
there was no.
How many do you remember was average?
Well, I mean, the most I remember were 12.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, the family's name was Penny.
Right.
And there were 12 pennies. It was a true shilling.
And people then would have kept maybe animals and such like in their backyards and such like that.
Oh, yes. Well, all the houses in those days, including our own, had stables in the outhouses. And that was the normal thing, although, I mean, we didn't keep any horses, but there were stables there for the horse.
And these are the 1920s, there would have been not that many cars about it.
No, there weren't many cars about at all. There were just a small, mostly horses and carts, and the market house was in the middle of the square, and farmers brought their goods to the market house in horse and carts.
And people then would have farmed. All the farmers around this area wouldn't have been mechanized.
No, there were no tractors. And I mean, you've quite common to hear about people injured on the plough. Something had gone wrong with the plough. Horse had done something, and there was no tractors in those days.
And so he would have, if those injuries had taken place, he would have had to go out and visit people all over the place.
It was not like nowadays. An accident, you sent for the doctor. And the doctor went and did what he could, and mostly ambulances were very scarce. The patient, if they had to go to hospital, they were put on a door or something and put in maybe the back of a lorry or back of a car, and some way taken to hospital.
No 6-hour waits and casualties.
No.
And the attitudes of people that you were telling me there that at that stage Papal would have had maybe up to 5,000 patients.
That's right. He had 5,600 in 1951.
And covering a huge area as well.
Covered it, stretching as far as Points Pass, Gerrard's Pass, Warren Point.
And then through the week they would have run the surgeries through the week every day except Thursday afternoon.
Thursday afternoon was only, yeah.
But they also then ran surgeries all day, even into the night, on the Saturday night.
Saturday night was the big night because the people came into the town on a Saturday night, and some of the men went to the pubs.
Yeah.
Other men that didn't drink just kept wandering around the town and meeting their friends they hadn't seen from the last Saturday night, discussed farming things, and the wives found themselves in a nice heated waiting room. And that was the norm.
And so those surgeries would have run into what?
10 o'clock, 10:30 at night.
On a Saturday night.
Money before 1948 was all in cash.
Yes. And people would have paid.
People paid on the spot, either what's terms in those times, half crowns or 2 shillings or whatever it was. They got their consultation, they got their bottle of medicine, and that was it. Thought the treatment was wonderful.
He had bulging pockets then.
He had bulging pockets, yes.
And so on a Saturday night in Rathfriland, then the place would have been just
buzzing. Really, that was the big night in Rathfriland. Shops were still open to 10 o'clock, and people just wandered about. They came into the town on the Saturday, on the Saturday night.
And so that would have been the case that there was no NHS then up until about 1948, so everybody was paying.
No, 1948, well, health scheme came in, and my father thought life was wonderful. The guy got paid. He got paid, and immediately.
Yeah. And you were saying that you would find that maybe the poorer people would have paid you quicker.
The poorer people were extremely good, and they would come with their shillings or whatever it was, and you were always assured of getting something from them.
Yeah.
You probably felt. I know my father at times would have chased them and said, "No, I'm not taking any money," and that was it.
And the things that he would have done more surgery, more delivering of babies.
Yeah.
At home.
Yeah, it was all home delivery in those days, and he would. There was a lot of home delivery. Nighttime didn't make any difference.
Yeah.
You went in your maternity case, and went in the surgery the next morning, 9 o'clock.
And might have sat up all night.
Yeah. Oh yes.
And sometimes even cesarean sections, although
No, he didn't do any cesarean sections, but some people, very rare people were born at home.
You were saying that your our own mother.
Your own mother and her brother were born on the kitchen table in Downpatrick Street, Rathfriland, by caesarean section. Consultant came from Belfast, and I presume the GP was the anaesthetist, and survived.
And the whole street would have.
Whole street, it was a big event. The big car arrived from Belfast, and everybody was out at what was happening to poor Mrs. Fagan.
So then you yourself would have come back to Rathfriland maybe 1950s?
1959, I was an assistant to my father and Dr. McCann, who were in partnership.
You also qualified in Dublin then as well?
I qualified in Dublin in 1956.
And then worked in the old Banbridge
I
Hospital?
worked in 3 hospitals. I worked Dr. Stevens Hospital in Dublin and in Banbridge Hospital on 2 occasions, and in Daisy Hill maternity for 6 months.
And by that time, when you came back then, the premises had moved into the bigger house?
Oh yes. My father had bought the house next door in 1937, and it was a grocer's shop with dwelling house, and he converted the shop into surgery. And for those days, 1937, that was it had sort of advanced surgery premises, because it had a surgery, a dispensary, an examination room, and a surgery.
Right. And,
So-
and the staff then at that stage? What
Staff, 1 staff.
One
When he came home, when he started up, first of all, he had no staff.
staff. But by the time you came
By
back,
the time I came back, there was a girl, one receptionist, was so-called receptionist, but really she sorted out the cards and called the next patient. That was it.
yeah. And so all the records would have been kept in those wee tiny Lloyd George.
There were shelves in that, the first, in a small room, the whole room was shelved, and all these folders were all kept on the shelves.
Yeah. All packed in.
And that previously, they were kept, where previously was his dispensary.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And then as time went on, then you graduated to have like a district nurse and maybe a midwife.
Well, district nurse was there, and the midwife was very important. But there was no such thing as a health visitor, and that was it. No social worker, anything like that.
Right. And the 2 hospitals would still have been going then, the Banbridge and Daisy Hill still on the go then.
There were 3 hospitals: Banbridge Hospital, Daisy Hill, and another place called Rathfriland Hill Hospital, where you were born,
Oh, where? In Uri.
in Newry.
Up
Rathfriland,
oh yeah, on the way in.
just on the right-hand side as you go into Newry.
And what did it do?
It did maternity
Right, just
at
maternity.
that stage.
And did no maternity happen in Daisy Hill then?
Well, I think it was more or less private maternity in Rathfriland Hill. Now, I can't tell you exactly, but I know that in the early stages in Rathfriland Hill, there was I was a surgeon there called Cronin, and he went, when he went on holiday, on one occasion, my father was asked to be a locum surgeon.
Right. And he would have.
He did appendectomies. Now, as far as whether he did anything else, I don't know.
And then when you came back, like it still would have been quite an old way of doing things. Like you were saying about the patients maybe with the Summit vest on, put on in early October.
Oh yes, those very interesting clothes those days. They, I can remember 1 or 2 occasions when I wanted to examine somebody's chest, and got to the point of this inner garment called the Summit, which had a cord string neck to it.
Yeah.
and it had been on that long that it was impossible to get the knot loosened, and so you had to drop the stethoscope down the back and sort of guide it to wherever you wanted.
And they would have put maybe a wee layer of goose fat on there.
The knot was where the patient's perspiration and everything else. It just was impossible to loosen.
And then the diseases that you would have been dealing with, like the likes of maybe asthma and such like,
Yeah.
would have been revolutionised
Well,
by the inhaler before that.
I really felt my big moment, my most spectacular change for me in treatment was in asthma. Asthma used to be dreadful. Before you got near the patient's house, you could have smelt the stuff that we're using, fuller's earth and all sorts of things, that stuff that they burned in a saucer all the time, that they felt the inhalation of this was curing their asthma. And you would have smelt it anywhere. And then to think that all these modern inhalers and nebulizers, things that, to me, that was wonderful. Yeah. Wonderful days. We used to give them injections for the really bad attacks of asthma, intravenous injections, and they did work. But yes, and that was good stuff. Yeah. But on the other hand, these modern inhalers and things like that made all the difference. Cortisone was a very big. And for, talking about drugs like that, when my father came home in 1923, you must remember, there were no antibiotics. And no antibiotics really, penicillin wasn't really used till 1945 because it was, they used so much of it, it really used during the war. Yeah. But if you think all those times, you had all sorts of things. You had poultices galore, and you had aspirin and coloured medicine.
And you said as well that for the chest that they used to put the
red flannel on their chest and poultice, bread poultice and various things. Poultices and various descriptions.
One of it, the guy, remember that had the burn on his leg and he hit him?
Oh yes, well that was later when I got a call one night to say that there was this man with a call down after the surgery to see this man that he had burnt his leg badly, and when I went down the Ballerony Road, you could smelt cow manure from you went in through the gate, and when I went in, and he was sitting very nicely comfortable on a chair with another chair in front of him, and his leg was completely encased in newspaper, and when I looked onto the newspaper, it was all cow manure. And this is what had happened. It spilt a bucket of boiling water on his leg, and I got the housekeeper to go and collect the manure, and made a complete covering of manure, cow manure and newspaper on his leg, and very nicely tidied up.
Did it work?
And I rang. I didn't know what to do with it because I thought of all sorts of things that are going to happen with the cow manure on a raw burn, and so I rang the local surgeon and I rang one or two others to inquire what on earth should I do. Should I remove it or should I not? And they didn't know what to do. They said just leave it. 3 weeks' time, we took everything. I was there when they took it all off. Leg was completely healed.
And then, so the time went on, then you moved from the square down into the...
Moved to the health centre in 1972 after the health centre had been complete, almost complete, when somebody put a bomb at the back of the health centre, and had to rebuild part of it, and it was 6 months later before we got in.
you're
1972.
and we're still not sure who put that dog.
Nobody knows, nobody has
Nobody
admitted
claimed.
who put it in, but there are various thoughts on the matter. Either way,
And so that was the time, 1972. Troubles were sort of full pelt.
troubles were full pelt at that time.
And would there have been occasions then when you would have been involved with some of that?
Yes, there was. There were occasions when people were shot, either kneecapped or just not. I didn't have so many actual people that were shot dead. Just people that were injured. But it was it. You were expecting an explosion or an injury all the time. This was a worrying time.
But did one occasion when you went out, had to go out to Hilltown?
Oh, I had to go to Hilltown, and a man had been kneecapped for, well, it was an interesting visit because I got a call during the night and just said, you're needed at this pub in Hilltown. And very little instructions. And afterwards I wondered but why on earth I had gone so readily. But when I went out there to this pub, everything was in darkness and just the lights of the car. I could see the door just opened slightly when I arrived, and a head came out and a voice came out. Is that you, doctor? Come on, this way. And I followed this man into this room, and I knew I had been visiting this bar before, so I knew the layout of the house and the bar. So I knew I was sensed I was walking down the bar completely lined with people. And I had no idea what was going to be at the end. But the door opened and the kitchen at the back, and the place was full of people, and there was a man had been shot in the knee. And
he didn't really want to go to hospital.
no, he didn't want to go to hospital.
Life then, I suppose.
No, he was scared about going to hospital. He thought that was even more dangerous than where he was.
And then the other thing that your opposition or not maybe opposition, but people who would have done cures and charms. And
Oh yes, well, there were those days. There were in my I had there were two charmers, Mary Keenan and Ellen McCarthy. One lived out of Kilcoo, and the other one lived in Cabra, and the other man, a man then called Dan Downey, lived up the Restreva Road in Hilltown, and they were very popular, and but unfortunately the two ladies, Ellen McCarthy and Mary Keenan, were constantly with me, getting their treatment for themselves. One of them had a glass eye, and one of them, Ellen, refused to let the nurses change her wee eye, as she called it, and I had to take her eye out and give it a wash under the tap and put it back in again. And she kept asking me, is it in the right way up? Are you sure it's the right way up? And of course I assured her it was. I really had no idea whether it was or not, but she was very happy.
And would she not let anybody else?
No, she wouldn't let anyone. One occasion, there was screams from the treatment room. Ellen went into the treatment room, sat down in the chair beside the bench, and popped the eye out herself skidded across the top of the bench, and the nurses got scared, wondered what was happening.
And then as time went on again, then Elizabeth then joined you in the practice.
Yeah.
And I was still in the new health centre.
Oh yes.
And things had changed quite dramatically,
Well,
I suppose, medically wise by that time.
Oh yes, I had, but it was great for me for the first time to have a lady doctor to examine the patients.
And it is amazing how things have changed. Elizabeth was unusual in being a lady doctor at that time.
Yes, yeah.
Within a generation, it's actually unusual
Yeah.
to find a male doctor.
That's
now.
right. That's right. No, it wasn't. It was quite uncommon to have a lady doctor, and we had a few in the district, but not locally in the district. You had places like maybe Ballynahinch and places like that had lady doctors, but not had a lady doctor. They were very uncommon, really.
And the numbers even that we would have about what 2,000, 3,000 patients, but you were up about 5.
No, I was never at 5. By that time, the practice had other doctors had started up. That Dr. Foley came as an assistant to my father first of all, and then he started up on his own, and then Dr. Miller came as an assistant, and he started up on his own. So really, it was divided in 3 at that time. But there was no nursing home, there was no residential homes or anything like that.
No. So in the old, when people got old, they sat in the corner until.
Well, you went into a house, the normal thing, you went into a farmhouse and into the kitchen, and first of all, you went through a half door, and there was a little entry place, and then you went into the kitchen, and in the corner was an old person in black sitting in the corner, and there was a big fire, open fire, and beside the fire there was the fan bellows, a great big wheel that you turned it to get the fire going well. You may have pet or little piglets or something like that at the side of the fire, or a pet lamb or a lamb or something like that. It was quite usual to bring them in to heat the fire.